After more than 15 years of field research, the Explain group decided to step up into the alien phenomenon. Since INEC's three-level classification of close encounters, the extent of the incidents and case studies grew to a degree of complexity which called for a new perspective in the interaction between humans and the visitors, shifting the prime focus of the investigation from the flying crafts to the extraterrestrial or interterrestrial biological entities, EBE, IBE. Close Encounters X, or CEX, is the TXP's 5-level classification of alien interference. CEX-1, or sighting of flying objects at great distance. CEX-2, or sighting of flying objects at medium or close range, which results in the modification of the environment. CEX-3, or sighting of EBE, IBE on the ground, with or without a craft. CEX-4, or human EBE, IBE interaction on all levels, from abductions to conflicts to cooperation. CEX-5, or human EBE, IBE product, from hybrids to clones to engineered living creatures, ELC. Well, Lea, before we start talking about your relationship and your first encounters with the ETs, I would like to ask you a few questions about your background. To begin with, especially your childhood background. What was your childhood like? What was your background, and who was Lea as a child?
My childhood was pretty simple, though a bit lonely. I spent a lot of time by myself. I preferred my own company as opposed to socializing and interacting with other kids at school or in my neighborhood. It never really, the gossiping and the the little dramas and fights never really interested me. Though I never had any problem. I know it sounds arrogant, but I never really had any problem making friends. But I had trouble connecting with people because it seemed like I always had to kind of mold myself to fit into what everybody else's expectations of how they saw me, and it was just never very comfortable with that. But with my family life, it was also pretty good as well. My mum was a very strong and independent person, and I always could look up to her, and she was a very strong supporter of me, and I could come to her with anything. Whereas a lot of my other family members, going outside the sphere, it was a little bit less. They were very strict, kind of European kind of family, and it was just like you have to conform to certain things, and you have to be a certain way to be considered normal and accepted, So I never could really fit their mold either. So that was kind of like my childhood.
Okay, and so you said something interesting. You said you didn't have any problems to make friends, but you were not really so eager to make ones. Like, you preferred to be lonely, be alone, because you felt like the way of the children around you was like maybe a little too far away from what you were seeing things. Like you thought yourself, you felt a little difference starting your childhood. You already had the perception that something different was in you, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I can give an example. Like when I was in the playground during recess, I remember I could see certain other little beings as well coming in to play with us, but my friends couldn't. and then I would tell them about them, and then they would be like, oh, you're just making things up, you're just imagining stuff. And it was just kind of like, well, I mean, if your friends don't have your back and they don't trust you, when you're going through something, like why are they there? And it was just very, because they were, they tried so hard. And I don't blame them for it, because we're all young and inexperienced, but they wanted to be accepted and be accepted by the whole group, by the whole school, and to be well liked. And I guess that was kind of where one of my kind of fears and goals were at one point, but then I realized it wasn't me. Like, I really couldn't. I just did my own thing, and like when I threw like shed all that kind of worry, oh, what are people going to think of me, and I started doing my own thing, it was just like people started to gravitate towards me, and that's where the whole ease of making friendships came in, and they were coming to me and talking to me and laughing with me. So it was just like, well, okay, maybe there's something a little more to this, So that was it. And I don't know, it's hard to really explain, but I didn't have words and thoughts that went along with this sort of like for example, conformity. I didn't have a concept of conformity in childhood. I didn't have an understanding of being part of the flock, or being part of being a sheep, or being singular, or being independent and individual. I didn't have those things. I just did certain things and I got certain responses. And but I realized that when I kept to myself, in the sense of I kept true to myself, I found that it was like that people had more of a positive response to me. And even though I didn't understand why, I just realized that this was happening. So yeah, that was my childhood in the social end. And I remember as well, like Mom, she would always try to get me to play with other kids as well. I remember we were walking past, say, in a park once, and there was a bunch of kids playing, and she turns over to me, why don't you go play with them? And I'm looking at them, and immediately, like, I had feelings of like, this is bad news, even though they all look pretty innocent and like nothing to the surface, everything looked pretty innocent and good. There was just something that rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I did not want to approach, and I still to this day can't tell you what it was, but it was just like, there was something about, I think the way they were treating each other, like in a slight passive aggressive way, that I picked up that Mum didn't. And it was just like, this is not, I can't explain it, because it was so long ago as well, and I was just like, I didn't feel comfortable coming up to random strangers and they're like, hey, can I play with you? It's like, that was also a very strange thing too. I don't know, but yeah.
Yes,
so I
well,
was performing.
we also need to remind ourselves that Leah, even though she's a starseed and thereby her nature is a hybrid nature, she is also a human being, and with the human being along comes the frailty and all the sensitiveness that every special personality bears. So in this case, we have to pay close attention to Leah's character, especially from the early childhood, because that's when she had her first contacts with the ETs, and the whole of her life is being shaped by those early experiences. So we have to take into account her human relationships as well as her non-human encounters, and that's why we decided to start from this. But next episode we are going to get right into the hot spot with Leah's first encounter with the ETs, her physical experience inside a spaceship. So stay tuned, and more to come. Thank you, Leah, and see you in the next episode.
Yeah, bye.